those three bands start their alliance is moving towards a confederation. In 1759, as a result of this, the Cherokee towns as well, they're starting to consolidate because of the amount of pressure of settlers moving towards their land. Some warriors were returning from a battle with French, and they are shot by colonists. Now, militia soldiers at Fort Prince George in South Carolina have been abusing Cherokee women, rape, okay, and this started sparking reprisals in South Carolina, and settlers started getting killed. As a result, Governor William Lytton met a Cherokee delegation, and then he takes those leaders hostage, and so as a result, they have to send an expedition of 2,400 troops to subdue the middle and upper towns of the Cherokee. What this is important to understand is that the Anglo-Cherokee War is during the same time as the French and Indian War. So we're starting to see patterns of tribal response to abuses. Interestingly enough, as we mentioned, as I mentioned before, during the Cherokee uprising, John C. Calhoun's grandmother is killed. Now, that you've got to place him in context. Then this places a context for when he creates the Bureau of Indian Affairs in 1824, when he's in the Department of War, and then it also explains his writing of the Indian Removal Act. To not talk about the Cherokee-Anglo War is to not understand the seeds of removal. And as a matter of fact, when he was pro-slave in the Senate, he said, "We of the South will not and cannot surrender our institutions. To maintain the existing relations between the two races inhabiting that section of the Union is indispensable to the peace and happiness of both. It cannot be subverted without drenching the country in blood and extirpating one or the other races." What you're seeing here is that South Carolina is taking a stance that they will not let go of slavery, and in some ways Calhoun is the barometer that's going to show that the nation is going to be on a road to conflict with itself. So as the Iroquois Wars ended in 1701 with the Great Peace Treaty, you start seeing this alliance of Algonquin tribes that the French have armed specifically to counterbalance against the rise of the Iroquois. So as a result of this, that same alliance that was created will resurface again now in the French and Indian War. British civil wars result in massive immigration to the New World, and so expansion into the Western Territory starts generating the groundwork for the fighting. The tribes that I have listed, the Ottawa, Sac and Fox, Miami, Loyal Shawnee, Absentee Shawnee, Eastern Shawnee, Potawatomi, Kickapoo, Peoria, Western Delaware, Eastern Delaware, and the Seneca Cayuga that are in Oklahoma now, those tribes can trace straight back to the French and Indian War. Those specific interactions between the two powers, Great Britain and England. And so in many ways the war was a proxy war, fought through tribes as well as with the armies. Interestingly enough, in 1753, Chief Gayasuda, I think that's his name, of the Seneca, will actually take Washington into the French territory. That's why there's a statue of this in Pennsylvania commemorating this, because he was acting as a guide. Interestingly enough, though, he will be one of the key Seneca leaders that will leave the British alliance and join in with the French alliance. And so during the French and Indian War, even though Britain technically wins the war because they capture Montreal, some significant battles take place. One leader that it says Fry's death in 1754. Well, Washington now becomes commander. This is the 21-year-old. The reason this is important is because if you go to the mountvernon.org, in fact, George Washington, by taking 20 French, capturing them as prisoners, sets in motion the actual war itself. I mean, there was already a lot of tension. Now, as a result of this, the primary fort that the French were operating out of was called Fort Duquesne, and this is significant because this will later become Fort Pitt, and that's Pittsburgh. The Battle of Monongahela, though, is where I'm going with this, and this is the battle where Braddock in British Army, including Lieutenant George Washington, move, and the French and those alliance tribes attack, and as a result, of the 1,459 British troops that were in this battle, over 1,000 were killed and wounded, and George Washington will escape that battle. Mainly, some believe, when I was reading it, and if you read the site, it's because they were still using British tactics. In other words, they were in columns, and they were moving up the road, and the Indians remained in the trees and attacked in a guerrilla style. That's very important because that is Washington's going to adopt that during the Revolutionary War, the Indian style of guerrilla tactics. So, as I mentioned, the chief of the Seneca fought for France, and he was at Braddock's defeat. Though France loses the war when Montreal is captured, they will continue to arm the first, what I call the First Northern Alliance. All right. As a matter of fact, I like to think of it as, in a Star Wars sense, this is the Rebel Alliance. But British expansion, when you look at it, and British expansion, French reduction, several things come out of it. Number one, the Iroquois Confederation of the Five Nations will end up having to take the Tuscarora, and they will become the Six Nations. This will generate allied tribes in the north under the leadership of the Ottawa. The Three Fires will soon become multiple. 100 towns of the Cherokee will unify into a confederation that will eventually become a republic. The Cherokee will become the Appalachian Wall, if you will. The 100 towns and 3 districts of the Choctaw will unify into a confederation that will eventually become a republic. 37 towns of the Seminole will seek an alliance, some of them with Spain. And so you can see the forecasting of the Seminole Wars. And then the 79 towns and 2 bands of the Muskogee will start coalescing into a confederation, and they will start incorporating other tribes like the Yuchi. And multiple languages beyond the alliance will become the Southern Wall in Georgia. This is interesting, and it's also important into understanding where the history is going to take us.